Well, we went and did it. We secured a top 7% finish after two stinkers in a row. Desperately required a bit of a bounce back, and that's exactly what has happened. And to be honest, I kind of nailed it in the last video. I discussed how I thought Spirit were going to use the fuel, the fire of getting clapped and sent packing by G2 back at Cologne as a way to really motivate themselves and push forward, to up their level, to take it personally, and that seems to be exactly what they did. Donk even came out in an interview and said it will take us another 3 or 4 tournaments back to back of really good performances to make up for that very bad Cologne performance. So they're clearly a team that has taken that loss in the best possible way. They have licked their wounds. They have vowed to bounce back with a bang, and that is exactly what we just saw at the Bet Boom Dacha event. Shiro going above and beyond. The only player that really eclipsed him was Donk, who had an MVP performance, very impressive by him. But of course, as ever, he is also the most expensive player out there. Very impressively done. Mouse a little bit disappointing. They lost to Eternal Fire, a legit 2-0 win for the Turkish boys, and they had some really big performances from players like Calix, who you don't normally expect to see up towards the top of the scoreboard, but he played very well. You got to give him credit. So a bit of a mixed bag, but we really did nail this one. Top 7%. We take that all day, every day. I saw a lot of people not believing in Spirit, going for Falcons, and unfortunately that proved to be the wrong decision. But we live and we learn. We can always bounce back in the Fantasy League. It's still super early days. That has catapulted us up into 8th position from around 15th. So we've really flown up the scoreboard here, and now we're only 4 points behind 5th spot, which again is the kind of plan. It is the goal for the end of this season to be in the top 5. So we've put ourselves in a good spot here within striking distance. But again, we've got to make sure that we don't go back into that top 80 kind of percentile position. So let's have a look at the group stage. Now, ESL Pro League is always a bit of a mixed bag for me in terms of how difficult it is to assess which players and teams to believe in. But because you have a bunch of top flight teams, sort of the top 10, top 15 squads, mixed in with some tier 2 or even tier 2.5 teams, sometimes you have 1 or 2 squads that has a very straightforward path, at least on paper, towards the upper finals, and that is the case here. So we're actually going to start with Group B this time rather than Group A. I should mention, although C and D are also here, don't be confused. It is only Groups A and B for this particular Fantasy League, and then obviously the next one will be C and D. In Group B, one team stands out from the pack here in terms of their bracket, and it is, of course, Spirit. Hot off the back of a 3-0 dismantling of Eternal Fire in the Bet Boom Dacha finals, they find themselves up against Wildcard first. Now, that is Stanislaw and Sonic's team. Some of the rest of the team probably not as well known, but some of you will remember Sonic, obviously, from his Extra Salt days, and he's been in a lot of NA-based teams. He is from South Africa. He is slightly their best performing player. But, of course, Wildcard typically playing against NA teams that are way paling in comparison compared to a team like Spirit. Stanislaw, of course, many of you will know him from his Optic days, etc. in the past. But if we're being completely real about this, Spirit should cruise through this first best of 3. Like, if they keep in the same form as we saw them end off in the previous tournament, like, they're going to make short work of Wildcard and potentially any team at this entire event, to be fair. But they have a very straightforward path to the upper finals, because after Wildcard is going to be MIBR or 9Z. Again, solid teams, definitely not bad squads at all, but they're not at Spirit's level. And I don't see either of them really posting up too much of a problem against a revitalized, a completely laser-focused Spirit team. They are looking very good for the upper finals. On the other side of the bracket, you have the Mongols, who got their upset win against Spirit back at Cologne, and were one of the teams that kind of put them in that place to face off against G2. And then you have G2 themselves up against Koi. So I'm expecting that G2 beat Koi. 3D Max actually having some good games as of late, proving themselves a little bit of a difficult team, kind of a pain in the backside sort of team. Maka playing some really good Counter-Strike as of late. So although I think Mongols will win that, I wouldn't be overly surprised if 3D Max came out ahead, but I expect G2 to actually cruise through to the upper finals regardless to face off against Spirit. And then in Group A, you've got FaZe and Eternal Fire I would expect to see occupying the semi-finals, which could be a really interesting game. My issue with Eternal Fire, though, is they blow hot and cold. They'll have one stellar tournament out of nowhere. They'll cause upset wins. They'll go far. Remember back at the major, like it was this incredible step up of pace and ability level and really riding off the crowd and everything else that made people begin to believe this is Eternal Fire's time to hit in the top 5, sort of top 3 positions in the world, and it never quite happened. And that for me is Eternal Fire. There's a lot of false starts. I think this could be more of the same. Now, I could eat my words, and if I do, by the way, I'd be super happy because I love watching this team. I've been casting Xantaras and Major in particular forever, and they're such an entertaining team to watch. They're such a passionate team as well, and for the whole sort of Turkish region, it would be incredible and inspirational to see Eternal Fire like actually get consistency and be like a legit powerhouse squad. FaZe also not in their best shape right now, so it is a potential, but I'm not sure I believe just yet. And then on the other side, you got Na'Vi, who are by far and away the best team out of these 4. Heroic and NIP, I don't have much faith anymore. Obviously, you guys, if you've been watching my videos consistently, you'll remember a couple tournaments ago I believed in NIP, and they were horrendous. They were horrific. Heroic are much the same. Someone needs to save Nertz from this squad. One of the best riflers on the planet, and he's just languishing away, just fading away in this squad. Nothing seems to be happening. And we're getting to that kind of point for Heroic in particular, where they have been a squad for a while. Yes, they've had visa problems with Dexter, etc. But you're getting to a stage now where if they continue to have bad starts and lose to teams they should be beating and go nowhere in tournaments, there will come a time where they're going to have to look at this roster and think, like, how much longer can we justify this? So I think these are the kind of events, actually, that Heroic should be pushing pretty far in. I'm not saying they should be beating Na'Vi in that semi-finals. I'm not saying they should win this entire thing, but at least show us signs of life. However, I expect Na'Vi to make it through to the upper finals, and I think they're going to beat whoever comes up against them, whether it's FaZe or whether it's Eternal Fire. Realistically, for me, I think they win. So with all of those being said, it kind of puts us in a position of having a look at the team that I've gone for. Now, I really did go back and forth on this one a lot, guys. And I mean, for several teams that I made. The main template was I always kept Shiro and Chopper in the team, and it was between these last 3. Because the prices on these players, I'll show you here, are very reasonable. And the reason why, for those of you who don't know, is that this Fantasy League was put up before the Bet Boom Datcha event ended. I think it was on the semi-finals before Eternal Fire beat Mouse. And so you'll see some of these prices when I look down are very cheap for Eternal Fire. Wakadia, 196k. Calyx, 195. Major, still around the 180 mark. Sure, Xantaras is super expensive, but he always is. And Woxic up above 200. But also the same could be said for Spirit. Whereas Donk has had a bit of a price hike up to 240 again. Where is he? Where's our boy? There he is, Mr. MVP himself. Back up to 240. Chopper remains at 187. And this is a guy that at one point was about 200k a few tournaments ago. So Zontix has had a little bit of a price hike as well. Magic's around the same. And Shura around the same. So because of the budget, I was very tempted to go for Eternal Fire. But as I said before, I just don't have faith that they'll beat FaZe in the semi-finals and they'll make like a really strong run at this event. They very well could, but I'd rather hedge my bets and actually spread out the budget just a little bit more on multiple teams that I think will make it. So we've gone for Shiro and Chopper, who I think are very likely to go the distance here and make the upper finals bare minimum. We've gone for Hunter based off the budget with Ema as well. 2 players that have had a pretty solid turnaround as of late. I think Hunter has really been activated and playing like a different level of Counter-Strike since Snax has joined the team. Ema's had some very impressive results as well as of late, really stepping up his individual effort. And then we have Carrigan, who was the only player that I could afford for a team that I thought would do well with 179k left in the bank. So I went for Carrigan. And to be fair as well, they're starting off against Sangal, who I think they beat pretty convincingly. And then they could have a pretty straightforward game against Eternal Fire because you never really know what to expect from those guys. So if FaZe do go through into the semi-finals and get success, then Carrigan can definitely pick up some points. You know, I'm definitely not at a point now where, even if my confidence has been shook a little bit in this FaZe team, I think it would be very unwise and foolish to write these guys off of a tournament because they are kind of sleeping giants. They still have a lot of capabilities, a lot of gas in the tank as far as I'm concerned. And so I don't dislike the idea of having Carrigan put in there. I'd have liked to have had a bit more of a solid player out of these two. Like, for example, Mobs would have been a nice pick instead, but he was 212,000, so that's quite a price hike. Instead, you can see here 212, Munacy 229, and Nico 221. So these are the only players that I could really kind of fill out the team with, and I've already touched on this before. I don't like to have 2 IGLs, and I certainly don't like to have 3 in my team. So I'm banking pretty heavily off Spirit here, and I'm expecting that G2 and Na'Vi and FaZe get the job done and secure me some points as well. I don't think this will be a top 7% team. I don't think this will be a top 10% team, because I feel as if a lot of people are going to be double stacking with Spirit after how they just played, and because of their side of the bracket as well is looking very nice and very welcoming. So I would imagine that I'm probably going to be, best case, like a top 20, top 30%. But I just didn't feel particularly great about this event with some of the prices and some of the opening matchups and kind of how the brackets were going. I think Spirit's a very easy pick for this. Anyway, we'll see how we do in the next video.